Good afternoon, evil, and I will tell you one story of a good viewing. He blinked at the dark ceiling, gasping as if asleep and awake were the same dream. The night stretched into a yawning maw above him, shadows bending at impossible angles. When sleep finally claimed him, he felt himself stretching, unraveling from his body, and curling into a new shape. It began again. In the first life, he awoke in a wooden cabin, snow piling high outside each shuttered window. No footprints pierced the drifts. Inside, the air thrummed with cold and something heavier, an unspoken presence pacing the walls. He saw it in the reflection of the iron stove, a tall silhouette with limbs far too long, its head wrenching at an unnatural tilt. A low clicking sounded behind him. He spun, only to find the chair empty. The wind outside whispered his name. He fled into the forest, his boots sinking in powder that clung like fingers, each step echoing in a silence that swallowed him whole. In the second life, he found himself under pale neon lights in a corridor of identical doors. Each bore numbers that flickered and shifted, 37, then 73, then 000. Hallway walls moaned under fluorescent hums, and behind every door came muffled screams. He tried to choose one, anyone, but his feet refused to move. Then a door swung open itself, hinges whining like a dying animal. Inside, blood pooled in a perfect circle around a solitary chair. On it sat a man with no face, and in place of features, deep hollows that pulsed with his own heartbeat. He felt his own face ripple merge. He staggered back, only to hear the man's whisper where none should reach his ears, "Your turn." By the third life, he was a child again, bouncing along a dusty road toward a carnival in the distance, the sky the color of rotten eggs. Tents lined the path, tattered banners snapping like skeleton ribs. Inside the carnival games, plush animals drooped over the counters, dead eyes staining the air with pity. He heard laughter, far too high-pitched, children's laughter, but it never stopped. The workers wore porcelain masks with grins painted too wide. One beckoned him to a hall of mirrors, promising a prize if he would step inside. He did, and found dozens of reflections, each one a screaming, decaying version of himself clawing from the glass. He staggered through the haze of his own breathing, realizing each sleep was a door into horrors unimaginable. He burned with dread. Would he ever find a world he could call home? He stayed awake for nights, eyes glued open, mind thrumming with dread. Yet exhaustion seeped in like poison. Finally, he laid down in his room, lights quivering in the corners. His last thought was relief, maybe this time he could rest. He dreamed of endless roads splitting beneath a blood-red sky. At every fork stood a version of himself, each missing a limb or bearing wounds fresh and festering. They whispered that only one path led back, but none knew which. A colossal moon rose behind them, pocked with teeth-shaped craters that grinned wide. The air smelled of brimstone and regret. As he stumbled forward, the versions lunged, tearing flesh from bone. He shrieked, limbs shredding, and rolled into darkness. He woke again, heart hammering like war drums. He lay in his bed, drenched in sweat, mist clinging to his skin. The clock on the wall read 3:13 a.m., then stretched and warped, digits flickering into 6 hours 66 minutes. A metallic click sounded by the door. It clicked again. And again. He glanced toward the sound, the door twisted inward, revealing nothing but an endless corridor. Soft chanting pulsed from within. He rose, body trembling, drawn toward the threshold. Then the door slammed shut behind him. He was no longer in his room. In the fourth life, he found himself strapped to a cold metal table in an underwater research station. The walls around him were pocked with small portholes, through which glimmered a deep, unfathomable black. Something moved outside, an undulating mass of tentacles and barbed suckers dragging itself along the viewing glass. The lights flickered. When they went out, a scraping began overhead like a million fingernails across steel. He screamed as the power returned. Rows of surgical tools hovered in midair, each blade stained with rust that seemed to pulse. In the fifth life, he was a janitor in an abandoned school, its corridors stained with graffiti in a language that burned his eyes. Classroom doors creaked open one by one, revealing rows of desks with twisted corpses slumped in place, mouths open in silent screams. The chalkboard at the end of the hall read, "Teacher never returns." He saw footprints of blood leading to the boiler room, where a ragged figure scratched at the walls, whispering confessions that wrapped around his mind like chains. He ran and never looked back. In the sixth life, he emerged in a war-torn city under a sky lit by radioactive cloudbursts. Buildings had collapsed into mazes of skeletal concrete. Everywhere lay bodies, halfway between man and thing, muscles twisted in agony. As he crept forward, the shadows detached themselves from the ruins and danced around him in grotesque imitation of life. He heard a radio crackle, a child's voice calling for help, then laughter ripping through static. He followed the sound, desperate, only to discover a small box, its lid flipped open, inside only a single tooth glinting like a wicked promise. In the seventh life, he found himself adrift in space, tethered by a single cable to a spaceship hull riddled with scorch marks. Stars seemed too close, glinting like shards of glass. Then the stars winked out one by one until only a single point of light remained. It grew into a monstrous eye, blinking with curiosity and hunger. The tether snapped and he drifted toward the abyss. He felt himself falling and falling, the screaming of dying planets echoing in his ears. He woke again with a gasp, but this time he recognized the ceiling. His room, normal, mundane. A siren of relief rose in his chest. Yet as he rolled over, his reflection in the mirror was wrong. His eyes were voids of ink and his smile stretched too wide, as if welcoming something in. He beat his palm against the glass and the reflection continued to grin. He reached for his phone, intending to dial for help, but the screen was black. Then numbers appeared, etched in frost across its face. 8 hours 88 minutes. Below, a text message from an unknown number. Tonight, you choose. Sleep in return or stay awake forever. He trembled as the night pressed in, silent and patient. His eyelids fluttered despite his will. One blink, two blinks, and he was falling into darkness once more. He awoke in a circular room, no exits, walls lined with mirrors. Each reflection held a different mask: joy, sorrow, rage, despair. Behind him, something whispered, choose. He turned to face the room and the mirrors shattered. His scream echoed in the void. He fell forward as though struck, tumbling through nothingness until he landed on a floor slick with viscous black liquid. He gasped, breath catching in a throat swollen with fear. Above him, a single bulb hummed, dripping sludge that hissed where it struck the floor. He tried to stand, but his body felt heavy, weighted by memories that weren't his own. His vision swam. When it cleared, he was no longer alone. Life 8. A figure knelt in the corner, rocking, murmuring numbers in a language that stung his ears. When it lifted its face, its skin peeled back like fine paper, revealing quivering muscle and bone beneath. It turned to him, blood-soaked hands reaching out. He bolted, slipping in the black fluid, scrambling toward a door that appeared where there had been only wall. He burst through into empty midnight. Life 9. A city of glass towers rose around him, each pane reflecting a different version of himself, each more twisted than the last, one with antlers sprouting through the skull, another with a gaping maw in the chest. He walked the streets as sirens wailed below. People streamed past, skin translucent, veins shimmering with unnerving light. Each passerby's eyes locked onto him, voids of hungry darkness. Their mouths moved in unison, chanting, "Return the debt." He didn't know what they meant until he felt something crawling out of his own mouth, thin, white worms writhing free. He gagged, stumbling into the next world. Life 10. He stood at the edge of a vast desert under a sky of rolling storms, lightning capturing skeletal silhouettes far on the horizon. He began to walk, drawn by distant drums that pounded like his heart. The sand underfoot was coarse, bones ground to dust. In the distance, a temple of shifting sandstone rose, carved with faces that screamed. Inside, the drums grew louder, and as he approached the altar, he saw his own corpse draped over it, eyes open in eternal terror. Behind the body, a priest in a bird skull tipped a chalice of black water. He lifted it to his lips, the taste of every regret he'd ever known searing his soul. Life 11. He revived on a battlefield thick with ash and the stench of burning flesh. A pale sun hovered at the horizon and the ground trembled with the march of thousands of mannequins, lifeless figures in military uniform, faces blank, rifles raised to point at him. They advanced in perfect unison. He raised his hands, pleading for mercy, but the mannequins' heads snapped around, joints cracking until each face wore his expression of panic. They fired. Each shot tore at him, but he felt no pain, only the relentless urge to keep running. He stumbled into a trench that opened beneath him like a maw, swallowing him whole. Life 12. He awoke submerged in darkness, lungs burning. He surfaced in a room full of water, its walls pulsing like veins. Floating around him were countless clocks, each ticking backward, each hand spinning until it snapped off and sank into the depths. He swam upward through the water, ripping through fabric that felt like skin until he broke through into air, but it smelled of rot. Around him, people danced in a ballroom of dripping fungus, grinning with rows of insectal teeth. They beckoned him with skeletal fingers. When he tried to speak, his voice came out as a high-pitched whisper that shattered the mirrors lining the walls. Shards of glass sank into his feet, pinning him in place as the dancers closed in. Life 13. He opened his eyes to find himself in a cramped attic, cardboard boxes strewn about, each marked with someone's name, people he had met in other lives. A single lantern cast long shadows. As he rummaged, a scrawl on one box read, Your name here. He snapped the lid. Inside lay a puppet fashioned from his skin, stitched together with hair and broken teeth. Its glass eyes blinked. It slumped forward, voice cracking. I am you. It lunged. He screamed, plunged its wooden stake into his own heart, and the world dissolved. Life 14. He awakened in a white room with no features. The walls pulsed, breathing. He stood, dizziness washing over him. From above, countless surgical lamps descended, illuminating a circle of figures in clean scrubs. They held scalpels and speculums, masks hiding faces. One stepped forward, removing her mask to reveal a mirror where her face should have been his face. She pressed a cold instrument to his eyelid. When she opened his eye, he saw through it a kaleidoscope of lives, his waking world breaking into shards. She whispered, "We have been waiting." Suddenly, everything shattered into static. He hurtled through darkness until he burst into his own bedroom once more, lungs heaving, drenched in sweat. His phone lay on the nightstand, screen intact, displaying a single message. "Congratulations. You've chosen to remember." He swallowed hard. The walls trembled. As he reached out, the floor beneath him cracked open, revealing the endless corridor from his nightmares, wide with beckoning darkness. His reflection in the shattered mirror on the wall behind him flickered. His eyes were no longer human, but twin black holes. His own face smiled back at him, invitation in its curve. He realized then that he was no longer a visitor in these lives, he was their architect. Each sleep, each world, each horror had been shaped by his fear, his guilt, his unspoken desires. And now, the true trial began, to reclaim himself from the labyrinth of his own making, or to slip into the eternal sleep where nightmares reign supreme. He closed his eyes, breath trembling. "I choose to wake." A deafening roar answered him. The ground buckled. The walls bled. And from the crack, the figure from his first life emerged, its limbs impossibly long, its head tilting at a grotesque angle. It tilted its head back, opening its mouth in a scream that echoed all the horrors he'd ever faced. Then everything went black, and he woke for the final time, or so he hoped, to a world that no longer felt like home. Thank you very much. See you all in the next video.